Today we have a story time of a spoiled brat that when he's told no, he has a complete mental breakdown and freaks out, and it's pretty funny. So yeah, sit back, relax, leave a like on the video to claim your free nothing, and let's get right into it. So this is a subscriber story, and if you want to send one in, join the Discord server. It is linked in the description. Anyways, right, we're going to call this subscriber Sam. I get all the names from the comment section, as always. Anyways, right, Sam, so he was in 8th grade at this point. And anyways, right, at Sam's school, there was kind of like a guy coming in from a, not an investment bank, but kind of like a dude that came in who like managed stocks or something. He might have been like a wealth manager or something like that. But anyways, right, he was coming in that day to kind of like talk to the kids about like future career paths if they wanted to go into finance, but also just kind of like advice in general because he was overall kind of like deemed as successful. And he also went to the school many years back. So the school asked him if he could come in one day and kind of hold like a seminar type thing just to answer questions, talk about his job, etc. And also just to encourage kids to do well in their, their kind of like later stages of middle school because that definitely affects what job you have. No, actually try in middle school, guys. Try in high school, try in college. If you try, you'll do okay. But anyways, right, that was kind of the whole idea of this event. And, Sam was somewhat interested, but, it was a required event, so it didn't really matter if Sam was interested or not. What really mattered was the fact that he had to go. So Sam was like, Sam was, interested. He was open-minded when it came to this event. But anyways, right, before the event, there was, lunch. It was kind of like a lunch break, and then this kind of like period of like an hour or two where everyone in 8th grade had class time off so they could go to this event and, sit there and ask questions, whatever. But during, lunch, he sat down with his usual group of friends, but there's also some other people they didn't normally talk to, including this one kid who we're going to call Josh. Anyways, right, Josh was kind of known as kind of like the spoiled jerk type kid who was always kind of like a jerk, but was also, look, here's the thing. Your parents do well. There's nothing against you, right? They did well. It's out of your control, right? You did not influence that in the uterus, so it's like nothing against you, but also like nothing for you. Like it doesn't make you better, it doesn't make you worse or anything like that. But, the reason behind Josh being such a jerk was, his dad was, pretty successful. He was at one of these investment type firms, and, Josh was like interested in, making lots of money, making that bread, And the night before this event, right, Josh happened to watch The Wolf of Wall Street, that movie, which is it's a solid movie, man. There's one scene that I think is kind of like a awakening experience for every man. If you know what that scene is, you know what that scene is. But anyways, right, basically that movie, if you don't know what it is, it follows the life of this guy who's like on Wall Street and is like selling stocks to people. However, he does it illegitimately and eventually gets caught. But it definitely does glorify the whole Wall Street life, which from what I've seen from interviews and like actual, people talking about their day-to-day as an investment banker or consulting, it's very different from that, or at least if it was like that in the 80s, it is no longer like that now. But anyways, right, Josh had seen that movie, the night before, and he instantly knew after seeing The Wolf of Wall Street that he wanted to be a big banker guy. And for some reason, right, he also just assumed that he was the greatest stock guy in the world, even though he just saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, like, the night before, but for some reason, he just like had a feeling that he was the greatest investor of all time. Trying to be like Warren Buffett or something. I don't even know. But anyways, right, he comes into lunch that day, and the subscriber Sam is sitting there at the table with his, his other friends, and then Josh, just starts to speak about how he realizes that, he wants to do what the guy who's coming in, he wants to do that when he grows up, and everyone's like, oh, cool, so you'll get a lot from this. But then Josh goes on to say that he is actually convinced that, he might be one of the greatest investors of all time. Yes, this kid who just watched The Wolf of Wall Street like 12 hours ago or 8 hours ago, he's now the greatest investor of all time. He said he woke up like the night before, he was like, Google stock's going to go up. And he checked the next day and Google was up like 0.5%. So like that's his proof that he was like a genius and definitely not just randomly chose correctly. But anyways, right, he said like, guys, listen. And, Sam and, Sam the subscriber and his friends were like, all right, what do you have to tell us? And Josh says, hey, I'm going to wow this guy so much that by the end of the day, he's going to give me a summer internship. And Sam kind of looked at him like, can you even get one of those? And then Sam asks him like, hey, can you even like get a summer internship. I'm pretty sure those are more or less reserved for late end of high school or even college students. And Josh goes up to him and just says, just wait and see, man. Maybe that's like for the typical kid who comes in, but by the end of the day, like, dude, you're gonna see. And Sam's like, all right, man, sure. Best of luck. Real quick, the rest of the story gets pretty interesting, so I'm just going to have the special word of the day. I know I've been doing it pretty early, but, I just like having it. I also don't like interrupting the flow. So anyways, right, if you made it this far into the video, comment spoiled down below. I'm going to filter the comments by that special word, so I'll try and heart as many of those as I can. But I'm pretty busy right now, so I can't guarantee a heart, but there's a decent chance you'll get one. So yeah, go ahead and do that. And things are about to get interesting. Anyways, right, so lunch is over, and Sam, his friends, as well as Josh, they all go to kind of like the career, it's not a career fair, because it's one guy coming, but they go to the presentation, they all sit down, and the first part of the whole event was just, the guy, just talking about his job, talking about what he does, talking about how it was important to do well in school to get his job, including, like, doing well in, like, their high school, middle school, they're in middle school at this point, right, 8th grade, it's like the last year in middle school, but still, they're in middle school, and he's like, yeah, all your grades are important, like maybe these won't be looked at really closely when it comes to college applications, but it's all about momentum, and especially in math, there's fundamentals, which by the way, man, just pay attention in math. If you ever want to do something like STEMmy later on, pay attention to math early on. It's the one of the pieces of school advice I can give you. Pay attention to math. It builds on itself. It's hard because like I have a lot of like gaps in my math knowledge, and it's very frustrating. Anyways, back to the story, right? So this guy's basically explaining like, oh, this is what I do. You should do well. And he's like, all right, I'm going to open up the next 20 minutes for questions. And some people ask some more like basic questions like, I don't know, what's your favorite part about your job? Like, did you know you wanted to do this when you were in school? And the guy said, no, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut when I was your age. And people kind of laughed a little bit. Like, they were just very normal interview questions, or not normal interview, but like standard questions that if someone came to like your school to talk about your job, and especially when you're in a grade where you're not really going to enter the workforce anytime soon, such as when you're in 8th grade, you're probably not going to, like, that summer become an investment banker or something and run JP Morgan. It's just probably not going to happen, right? So the questions you're going to ask this guy are going to be a lot more like, what's your favorite thing to do in your free time? Do you like your job, etc.? But then all of a sudden, right, because it's kind of like there's like a microphone and there's a line. So Josh has been waiting this line for like a little bit. And they're about 10 minutes into the 20-minute question period. And eventually, it's Josh's turn to shine. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call this shining, but it's his turn to draw the most attention, I guess. So Josh goes up there. He goes up to the microphone. He's like, hello, Mr. I don't know. We're going to call him Mr. Bank because money. I don't know. Hello, Mr. Bank. It's good to meet you. My name is Josh. And he says his last name. I'm just not that creative. My name is Josh. Last name. And I think that you have an internship spot available for me. Like going off super cocky and confident. And Mr. Bank kind of like laughed a little bit because he was taken off guard. He's like, hey, Josh, like very nice to meet you. I'm excited that you are interested in this industry. It's a great industry, but unfortunately, we really only look at college kids for internships. And Josh is like, I thought you'd say that. You won't be thinking that by the time I'm done. And Mr. Bank is like, what is this kid going on about? Kind of turns to like the teacher, and the teacher kind of gives him this look of like, dude, I have no idea, bro. And Josh is like, I think I might be one of the greatest stock pickers in the world, just like the guy from Wolf on Wall Street. And, Mr. Bank was like, you mean Wolf of Wall Street? He's like, yeah, same thing. Wolf on Wall Street. I might be the greatest stock picker of all time. Mr. Bank says, I mean, Jordan Belfort, the man portrayed in that movie, he did scam many people and went to jail. And also that movie is not an accurate representation of the current culture on Wall Street today. And at this point, Josh is just ignoring that. He's like, anyways, you'll understand what I mean in just a second. Last night, I said to myself, after doing some deep analysis, and by deep analysis, he means nothing, right? I predicted that Google stock would rise. And I checked this morning, and it was up 0.5%. Mr. Bank took out his phone, looked at Google stock. He's like, okay, it went up in the beginning of the day, but it's actually down 0.2% now. And Josh is like, that doesn't matter. I still predicted it. And Mr. Bank is like, just, because you can predict one thing randomly going up or down doesn't necessarily, make you a stock picker. I'm not saying you shouldn't, advance in this career path, but, if there's actually quite a few resources I can give you, Josh. Like, if you're really interested in this career path, like, there's a lot of free online resources that'll get you a good foundation for when you're in college and it's appropriate to try and apply for an internship, you could actually have a possibility. And at this point, Josh is starting to realize that Mr. Bank is saying no to him. And let me just say that is something that Josh does not hear often, if ever. And at this point, Josh is starting to fall into denial. He's like, so I got the internship. He's like, that's great. That's great to hear. And Mr. Bank's like, Josh, no, I mean, it's nothing against you personally. Like, trust me, I'm sure you're a smart kid and it's very cool that you're interested in this. It's just, we can't hire someone in 8th grade. Josh, you have to understand. At this point, right, the teachers were kind of looking at each other because this whole thing was going down publicly when, Josh is standing there in a line with a microphone with quite a few kids behind him and the time is starting to run out. And one of the teachers, looks at Josh and says, hey, we got to keep the questions moving. Is there anything else you'd like to say? And was there anything else Josh wanted to say? Spoiler, there was. So Josh was at the microphone. He was visibly upset at this point. And he was like, Mr. Bank, you don't understand what you just did. And at this point, the teacher was like, oh boy. So the teacher starts walking in to try and remove Josh. But Josh was able to get in a few more words. He was like, my dad works at what other firm? And I know that people in the industry talk to each other. And you're gonna wake up tomorrow. You're gonna wake up tomorrow, man. And you're gonna be fired. You're gonna. And at this point, Josh was just cracking. He was like, I'm gonna make sure my dad fires you. And Mr. Bank is like, kid, I know the firm that your dad works at, since you just said it. We're actually competitors. I don't know why I'd be fired. He's like, he can do it. You'll see. You'll be. And at this point, the teacher goes up to Josh and kind of grabs him and starts dragging him away. And Josh still has the microphone for a few more seconds and says, this is the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life. Tomorrow you're going to wake up. You're going to find out that you're fired. You're going to have to go back home and tell your wife and your kids that they're going to have to starve and your wife is going to have to do special work to just pay for it. And at this point, the teacher's like, bro, you're done, bro. You're done. Takes the microphone, drags him out harder, and is Josh is still screaming at this point, as he's being dragged out. And everyone else in line who's standing waiting for a question has the most awkward face ever. And the entire auditorium is just completely silent. So then the next kid in line is handed the microphone and Mr. Bank is like, can you top that question? And, obviously everyone kind of laughs because it was a little tense for a second. Subscribe if you haven't already, and now go watch another video. There's some on screen, some on the recommended. Click one and I'll be very happy. Bye.